Welcome to my presentation on promoting affordable rental housing in Tanzania. My name is Felician Komu. Formerly, I used to work for the University in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and now I'm in private practice, having retired. So I'll take you through a few slides. Okay. So for the first introduction, I should say that this is my presentation is based on a rental housing market study that was carried out in Tanzania. This was funded by the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa. And the main objective of that study was to evaluate rental housing markets in Tanzania, and the special focus was on the interconnectivities with affordable housing strategies in two cities. That was Dar es Salaam, the commercial hub, Tanzania, or the former capital city, and Dodoma, the new capital city. Now, the study was largely based on the CAF rental housing framework, which entailed 5 survey methods. There was a physical survey. We covered about 22 urban wards in the city of Dar es Salaam and 4 wards in Dodoma. And that was give us 529 respondents in Dar es Salaam and 73 in Dodoma. We had 23 case studies. These are for small landlords. We'll look at those later. And then we had key informative interviews. And these are those working the government, key officers, government officials, investors in public companies. And then we ramped it up with the Survey Monkey, which is online survey, and the mobile surveys. We did have very good results from the mobile surveys, which was fortunate. There were 3 of us who were involved, myself and somebody, Siriana from South Africa, and Agnes Mansumbi from Aldi University. She's a lecturer there. I'll take you through just a glance of what it is in Tanzania. It's a big country. We're surrounded by 8 countries, a lot of water bodies. We have over 200 towns. The main city is the Dar es Salaam, it's in the coastal East African coasts. And then we have other 5 cities. So in total we have 6 cities. And we have 22 municipal regional towns and 82 townships. And the population, the general population is around 60 million. Some will put it as 57. The urban population is about 1/3. And the urban growth rate is actually 5, which is rather high. And we have around 8.5 million households. That means a lot. And out of this, very few are working in formal employment, as we shall see. Actually, it's about 20-24%. The national economy has registered quite some impressive growth. The GDP has actually hovered around 6 to 7% over the last 3 years, which is very good. And the inflation rate has gone up from 2 figures away in 2008 down to 3.4 last year. So if you sum up what we have as a country in terms of urban population, we have for the cities, we have about 8 million. The municipalities, 2.5, but you see a large part of the population is actually in the towns, small towns, and these are those towns with between 15,000 and 149,000 people. Many of these small settlements, about 82 of them. So just to take us through the general housing condition, there is a very big difference between what we have as rural and urban housing. Rural housing is definitely dominant, about 70% of the national stock. It's largely on a registered land. It's held on customary norms, traditions, and it's almost 100% owner occupied. Generally substandard, a bit of traditional, temporary, permanent material that's like timber, grass thatch, and mud walls. Sometimes it's cow dung and so on. But they are, in terms of temperature, climate, they are very good. But they have, they don't conform to the normal standards like having an internal toilet or enough ventilation and so on. They are also poorly provided with infrastructure, electricity missing. Some have water connection, but otherwise they take water from outside the houses. There is nothing we can talk about that one. The average unit size is considered in terms of sleeping rooms. A majority, around 40%, will have dwelling units with over 3 bedrooms. Normally, it's like a cluster of families staying together. And this is some information from the population census of 2012. Majority will have an external pit latrine. Now that is important to note because one of the decent home standards, or as we call them, new Babora standard here is that every house must have access to at least an external pit latrine. In terms of urban housing, 30% of the national stock, it constitutes about 30% of the national stock. And we have 2 major categories here. We have the high income housing that constitutes about 15% of the entire urban housing stock. It's largely informal residential area. But these are the, like posh, prime residential area. The mix of owner-occupier and rentals. The rentals are actually more than the owner-occupier. So they're provided by large-scale providers, and most of this will be government departments or parastate organizations, some patient funds. They're professionally managed, and like have a property manager or state manager. But these are, because they're heavy and they are highly priced, they are also sensitive to any change in the economy. Right now, like we're going through a decline. The rents are declining, particularly this sector, this segment, the high income segment. The medium and low income, this is the largest, and they find this like all scattered all over the cities. The majority of this is unfortunately found in informal settlements. They have least urban infrastructure in terms of roads, access roads, in terms of electricity, in terms of water, in terms of drainage. As we shall see, most of this, this is the actual medium and low income. These were the key areas where we did work and where most of these presentations is based. Now, when you look at housing in Tanzania, yes, you have to recognize that we have had 2 major eras. There was that era where everything was done by the government. The government was the provider, was the enabler, was everything. And this was during the early period when we got independence in 1961. So then most of the 1960s up to 1990s, actually early 1990s to say. We even had a case where we discouraged investors to invest in real estate, rental housing. Indeed, there were times in 1971 where the government nationalized all those properties that were rental units, and whose price was, or whose value was equivalent to 20,000 USD at that time, or TZH, Tanzania shillings 100,000. This was in 1992 when we went into the liberalization era. Things changed, and now we have a free market, so investors can actually invest in rental housing. They can rent and get money. It doesn't matter whether they are owning them while they are in the country, or in the old times in the socialist era, absentee landlords were heavily penalized. They actually had their properties confiscated or nationalized. The urban growth rate has actually been very high, 5% continuously. We started with a very small population of urban population of less than 9 million, 9 million in the 1960s. Today it is over 20 million, accounting for more than 30% of the national populations. The housing sector faces a number of problems, but most of it is the question of meeting housing, this economics problem, the housing supply and demand. The supply doesn't meet the demand. And there are reasons for this. It's because of the fast growing cities. There's also growing middle income brackets, because of the life longevity. The lifespan has also changed. The lifespan, expected lifespan was around 45. Today we're talking about 60. Therefore, we have a growing middle income group. A lot of the population has actually blown up on the middle bracket. Also, other problem, big problem that we have is the country that goes through is the informalities. A lot of even employment is mostly in the informal sector. Housing is, most of it is in the informal sector, 65%. And informality in terms of lack of services, lack of service land, a transaction being done not through documentation, not through known procedures. So it's more of an informal way of doing transactions. It also has this peculiar character feature that is the nation as a government, as the public. The emphasis has always been on home ownership, that people should have, everyone should own a house. And that's why you see what has happened over time is the government surveying land and allocating distributing this land, hoping if you give somebody a piece of land, then you can develop, you can put a house on it. So by giving land, then you're also solving the housing problem. That has proved failure because the efforts to the government doesn't have those capacity to establish so much amount of land that will meet demand for housing demand for the entire population, particularly when you have new people coming to the towns. So, and as I said before, during the socialist era, actually the rental housing was quite limited, restricted. It was like taboo to trade in rental housing. So it's like saying housing is a welfare commodity, should be given to people for free. Those with money, they should not be allowed to exploit those who needed to be housed. Now, so much for the general housing condition. Now, I'm supposed to talk about ways of promoting affordable rental housing. Now, I thought of looking at housing in the two sectors, and the prime residential, this is urban now, and those in the medium and low income. If you look at this slide, you will notice that we are talking of in the prime residential area, that's on the left, in the prime residential area, area, you have we experience huge shortages up to year 2000. At that time, up to 2000, a unit 3-bedroom house would cost you around $1,500 per month. That's quite a hefty sum. But there are cases up to 6,000. And I'm told even in some special cases, particularly with these mansions, you could get accommodation for up to 11,000 USD. Now, things have changed, as we shall see. Most of the high, on the prime residential lettings, the tenants were expatriates, mostly expatriates and senior executives, those working with the international organizations or working with international companies, senior government officials whose rent was paid by the government. And the supplier large landlords, big private developers, a few by the government itself, but not state organizations. This is only in the major cities. So the types that we look at those a little bit, but we're talking about really expensive group of buildings. On the other side, in terms of the medium low-end latencies, where common man lives, and if you look at what was happening between the year 2000 up to 2010, and this is important because the year 2010 were the project, a housing finance project that brought in a lot of changes in the system. So we have a different setup, as we shall see later on. So when you look at the other group, the medium and low end ratings, here this is the one that has, even during the beyond 2010, is persistently deficit. There's a big deficit of this one. And this is characterized with low value properties, simple structures, and mostly there will be a person renting a room, and the room costs around 6,000 shillings, or 10, which is equivalent to 10 USD, and the range will go up to 200. If you compare with the prime residential, you can see quite a big difference. And the tenants, the category of tenants there, they actually small individuals, low-cadre employees. They could also be graduates and students. The big problem with students now, because we have big numbers of students coming out to the market, and they need to be housed. Well, the suppliers is a big group. Sometimes it's the employers, like parasite organizations, they'll provide some accommodation for their own people, like employee housing, and small landlords. These are individuals. A person gets, we have some nice stories for those who will be able to get a copy of once it is published by CAF. Nice stories of the journey to becoming a landlord. Somebody starts with being a tenant, and then gets some money somewhere, maybe through wages, and then he builds, he can hire a bigger room or a bigger house, and afterwards he is able to build a small house. Then he realizes he could share it with somebody else, and in so doing, he has one or two or three other houses, and he's become a landlord. The housing types there are small units in most cases, but we also have detached houses like we have on the other side. So it's quite a big variety. Now, in the beyond year 2010 to current, the supply has shifted in terms of prime residential area. So there has been, because of this, there has been a lot of in 2010 housing finance projects. There's been a lot of changes in terms of facilitating new housing. So there's been a steady increase in the supply, particularly in the prime residential area. As a result, prices have actually declined, have fallen. Now they are finding it difficult to charge those old rates, 1,000 to 6,000. The reason for this, some expatriates have left because with time the economy is changing as well. So we have the expatriate population has actually gone down. The individuals, the government is also not able to support its staff. But why should you? Well, there's so much in the market in terms of supply. So the prices have actually gone down. That's why we have serious problems with the rental housing markets. Individuals are actually trying to transform these big mansions, subdividing them so that they can make them smaller units and therefore able to get them back onto the market. On the other side, on the right side of your your screen, you see again we have the same problems with the medium and low income. There's still a shortage, but the prices are not declining. They've actually stabilized. They've actually remained stable throughout. And so what you're saying, during the 2010 to 2020, we're having actually something that is happening, some stabilization coming to the market. The supply is like catching up with the demand, but not that satisfactory level. If you go further and start examining, investigate what is the market, what's the nature of that, of the rental housing markets. And then again, we have two ways of looking at it. We have if you look at we were talking about the prime and now the medium and so down. If you, out of this, we look at what is actually happening. You also have in the prime residential area, you also have formal as well as informal. So we can look at the market in terms of the context of the formal and the context of informal. Informal meaning they don't comply with some planning, surveying, and titling. So they have land, they have houses built on untitled land. This is the informal context. But you also have a mix between the two, formal and informal. People building with some form of planning in a planned area. So an individual could also arrange to have this piece of land surveyed and titled. So that's what we call mixed informal context. So in each of these, we found we can go further and investigate, look at the stock, try to put some money on some quantification on it, how many of the stock has come off the market. We can look at the problems in terms of supply. We can look at the nature of transactions. The big question, however, is what is the quality of, what's the housing quality in these two cases? And this is an area, although I'll not deal with the quality issue at this stage, because what I'm interested in is the understanding and ways of promoting affordable rental housing in the market. And so look at what is available there in terms of stock. Now, if you look at the housing, the rental housing in the formal context, what we realize is there's quite a few, not so much information, but there are some general statistics that we can trace. Look at the developers, go to municipal government, they will have some information about when the stock was put up on the bucket or was built, and who owns it, and how much rent is being given. But in any case, however, there's very limited data available. That is, there's no place where you can go and get information, not on your screen, not on your PC, but you may have to go to the municipal government, and even the municipal government, they're not that organized for you to get information. That's still a bit of a problem to get actual number of the rent housing stock in even the formal context. The local sub-ward offices, we have a municipality, and the municipality, they have a division, and then we have a ward, and the sub-ward is the lowest level. And this lowest level, they actually keep some information that can be, they are slightly reliable when they compare, it's better than nothing. On the informal ones, here we have a large, like if you take the case of Dar es Salaam, we have about 115 informal settlements, and the housing 500 families, which is equivalent to 60% of the Dar population. The Dar population is close to 6 million now. Now, what we found in the informal context, in terms of if you wanted to do a stock, housing stock, the rental housing stock, we have problems because nobody keeps records of the own. Again, the local sub-ward offices, they would have information that's a little bit, not too bad. That is some information you get there. Not well structured, but you have some information who is there and who owns what. In terms of housing supply constraints, what kind of problems that rental housing markets are getting in the formal context? Again, we have serious problem on getting land. It's not the same. The problem with land in the formal context is much more serious than in the formal. In the formal, people actually do not have to comply with any planning regulations for their land laws and so on. So they normally have less challenges than the person who wants to build in a formal. The only problem is if they can afford to buy the land. So this that at least they are informal. They have, and that's why they go informal, because it's easier to get land and either squatting on it, or your own land on the peri-urban areas, or you buy it from another person. And it's simply a question of changing the sales agreement. In terms of capacity to finance in the formal sector, they have more, they have access to loans, they have the papers, they can use the properties as a collateral, but they are subject to taxation. They also have problems with bureaucracy in getting permits, because you cannot build that. All this don't apply to the informal context. In terms of transactions, now, I think this is where we are interested more than anything else. You have, in the formal context, use of attorney or advocates is usually common. Of course, some other people may not do, but it's always advisable. This may not be the case with the informal arrangements. In the informal arrangements, sometimes it's just a sales agreement, but it's witnessed by a local sub-ward leader. There could be differences in terms of the level of management, in terms of rent housing. In the formal context, particularly with large properties, they may take a professional person to manage the market, manage to do other, like taking up insurance and so on. And not the case with informal, because they tend also to be small, they tend to be less expensive, and so they also, you may not afford to get somebody to that professional person to manage their properties. Now, so what are we saying? If you look at rental housing markets in Tanzania, then you're looking at different typologies, and there are a variety of them. The variety, the different types in the formal settlements, these planned areas, they are fewer than they are in the informal settlements. What we're saying, in formal settlements, there will be a multitude of housing typologies. And common types in the formal settlements, these are figures that we try to work out through the study, responses that we received, and realized in the formal settlements, the formal settlements, we have majority is of single-family detached houses and villas. They call about 50%, and then apartments, which is where they were the so-called flats, block of flats. But then we have this ushering of luxury apartments, and they're getting more. They become more and more popular. 50% they count for those houses in the formal settlements, and we have cases where landlords share, a person shares part of his unit, dwelling unit with the tenant. Sometimes it's a backyard unit, sometimes it's within the building. In terms of now here I tried to, if you look at if we were to sum up all the characteristics, the interest is what is happening with the low, medium, and low income, and this is the summary of what you see in the medium and low income areas. In terms of size, the rooms are quite small. No, not small. They are actually big, because they are actually complete. A sleeping room that is big enough for you to keep your clothes, your other things. So it's your home. The room is your home, and we have in terms of private landlords, we can We can look at them in terms of private small-scale landlords. I can look at them in terms of large-scale landlords. They also, large-scale landlords, they would actually provide like something close to a studio. The private small-scale landlords, they provide just a sleeping room, four walls, and that's insufficient. And they'll share the corridors, they'll share the toilets, they'll have a place where to spend a day off, like in an open yard. If you see employer-based accommodation, you have a better arrangement. So what we're saying is, we can look at the characteristics in terms of who is supplying, who's the supplier. Is it a small-scale landlord? A small-scale landlord, who is he? It's a person who owns, that's the definition that we gave to in the study, is somebody who owns up to 5 units that is leasing. And private scale landlords, these are those who own more than 5 units. And the employer-based is simply employer. They're providing workers housing. The public institution is like parasite organizations, like the electricity power company. And in each of these, you'll see there are different in terms of unit size that they provide. They're quite different. They vary. Like if you look at the second row here, it's a two-room lettings. So it's 2 rooms, separate rooms, but here is actually a unit, and the top size is quite big. Similarly for the employer and the private scale landlords, they will be more or less the same. And so the same with the public institutions. So you can see the small scale landlords who are actually the odd one out. This was others, so they actually complying with some certain standards, some certain regulations. It's not the same with the small scale landlords. In terms of type, again, the small scale landlords, they have different, they may have detached units, but they have rooms. There's rooms that they are letting. And we shall see later that we have different rooms, the so-called rooms as a unit. They can come in with different, a room with a veranda, a room, just a room with a lounge, a room with ensuite WC and so on. But see, when you look at the private large-scale landlords and employer and the public institutions, they have some form of well-known regulated type housing typology. The rents in the private scale landlords actually, like they vary, they go with the market, and they are more affordable. In these others, they are actually a little bit high, but those with employer and those with public institutions, quite often they are subsidized. So they get either employees get they pay through their wages, and therefore it's generally it's between 6 and 12%. In terms of the tenants, private small-scale landlords actually accommodate low to middle-income people. Now, my problem here is to define low to middle-income group, but in terms of the country, Tanzania, we're still talking about those who get a minimum wage of 150,000 shillings. That's about $40 per month, up to 70 or thereabout. The relationship, landlord and tenant relationship with the small-scale landlords is really informal. The rest is quite formal. And in terms of location, the private small-scale landlords, they tend to be in the less favorable housing areas. If we pause and look at who are actually the housing suppliers at macro level. At the macro level, if you look at the public sector, we have 3 categories there. They provide about 12 and 6% of the total stock. This is by very recent research by certain Kenyan-based real estate firm. And then we can look at the institutional investors. we have some investors who they run business, but their business is not real estate. They are doing some other things like the Arusha International Conference Center, their international conference organization, facility organization, but they own some 640 rentals units in Arusha. And they actually, these are high-class property. Pension funds, very, very significant role they have played in the economy. Close to 10,000 units in the last 10 years. We have public companies, there's major supplier, 40,000 units of, on the list is, on the top of the list is National Housing Corporation. Private sector developers, we have two categories. Again, we have the small scale investors, these are the small scale landlords that we looked at before, and the large scale investors, they have a very small share of the market. But they provide expensive buildings in prime residential areas. At meso level, these are the those who do the kind of providing service in between. And this is an interesting area because we have three categories. We have the so-called unregistered local estate agents. These are people that are not formal. They don't have any business license, but they provide some quasi-formal regulator, they act like quasi-formal regulators because they actually have the information about what is happening in terms of who's leasing what and what price and what is available and so on, and what kind of housing that is required in terms of rooms, what room size, and what will it have. So it's a group. Quite often they're well organized. They work through a ward, and they are known. They are registered with not registered as it were. They are recognized by the respective ward leaders. They actually work in cartels. So they have in a particular neighborhood there will be a number of agents, and if you go to if an agent goes to another neighborhood, he will not be allowed. It's like that's their den, and that's how they work, and they will not allow. And they're actually protective of their areas of jurisdiction. But they have a very interesting way of doing things, procedures, and quite uniform. This is simply to show you. The tenant would approach an agent, and say, he will speak up his needs, what his needs are. The agent will accept, and they will then approach the landlord, and then will conclude the deal, and then they sign the bill. They'll sign the lease agreement, and for that you pay. Oh, I need to go back. Oh, I need to go back. Sorry. Yeah. So you have they are the main. They actually dominate the markets. This you cannot do anything, and they have the information more than anything. The registered estate agencies are professionally qualified. They have license. They have known offices. Unlike the registered local estate agents, the landlords we call them, they will have a license. They will have premises. They know where to get them. But quite often they will rely on the unregistered agents because the agents actually local and they have a lot of information. Financial investors, after 2010, the number of banks operating in the housing sector has increased tremendously. There were only 3 in 2010, but now there are over 34, and providing low home loans, which is the size of home loans to the economy is quite small. It's 5 billion USD, which is less than 4% of the total housing or total finance in the economy. So a number of emerging issues, if you want to look at that, and this is in a way towards the promote, because we want to, at the end of the day, to look at how we can promote affordable rental housing in Tanzania. First, we have an impressive economic growth. We have had a steady GDP growth at 7%, 6 to 7%, and this has acted as a good stimulus to housing development and consumption. We have an increase of housing stock, particularly in the upper end housing in the prime residential area, and that's where we have had a serious impact on the rent. Supply has tilted the balance. Now we have the number of properties that are falling vacant because tenants cannot afford because of other things as well. Evolving new forms of rental housing tenure. We now have a tendency, we're moving from standalone kind of developments to multi-family units. Whether it's in a block of apartments or in a gated compounds or in the subdivision, conveniently partitioning houses to get an extra unit. We also have new forms of landlords and tenant relationship that's coming out, and this is because it's getting the compacted housing, and then all those questions about community living, the question of handling waste, the question of even taxation becomes an issue. We also have old areas that are getting congested. Of course, it's common everywhere, not just Tanzania, and require a development, and this would have an impact on the rental housing stock. And finally, we have this is a continued problem. The urban areas have always been prone to informal housing, and we can also extend the argument and say not simply the urban area, the public open places within the planned urban areas have also been prone to squatting, and where we have informal housing, particularly where government is the key landowner. There are also challenges, and that these are challenges, perhaps these are the ones that we will have to address if you want to promote affordable rental housing in the country, in Tanzania. The first one, there are 4 key bottlenecks. The first one is lack of reliable and accurate data on rental housing markets. And this is a problem that the Center for Affordable Housing Finance tried to address, quantifying the rental housing problem. And they did some good studies, and then they had some gaps that they identified, and that's why they commissioned the study that we did in 2019, that was October to November. So there are 2 issues here. There's one, sheer lack of records, simply no information, but there is some information somewhere. Most of it is online, so like listing, the newsletters and on the websites, but some of this information goes unchecked, it's not regulated, and some of it can be not appeal. Some of it has actually been quite contrary, misleading even. We have a second set of problems. This is the high compliance needs to the land and planning laws and regulations. The laws are, I think, if anything, Tanzania has best laws in terms of land administration, construction and planning. The problem is they tend to be rigid. We have a case, for example, where the typology, the housing typology is changing from a typical standalone structure, standalone like a detached building, to multi-family units. Now, in terms of the law, the Urban Planning Act of 2007, they defined use classes. So use class A is definitely for single dwelling use. So you get a permit. You are not allowed to do provide more than 1 unit on a given piece of land that you're asking for a building permit. Now, if you go for, and this is given almost automatically, if you apply for a piece of land, Even if it was your land and now you want it plant, then they give you a use class A. So you need, then after this, if you wanted an apartment block on this one, you need to make the application for change of use, and that takes about a month to get it through, and it's expensive. That delays the whole procedure of meeting demand, housing demand. Lack of awareness on urban development and plan regulations. Unfortunately, this is still a problem. Why? Because the laws in a particular domain, only those who are aware of what is happening, that they will go and access this. They are not really available. Something has been happening since 1999, when we had our first comprehensive land laws. Something's happening. There's a lot of that is, the government, the Ministry of Lands in particular, is doing an education. There's also a new preference. If we look at the national policy and programs, there is real, like favoring. They're looking at development is, if you look at solving a rental housing problem, we are solving for those who in government offices, those who are working for public organizations. We are looking at low housing development, not compact housing development that will accommodate few more people. It's cheaper to have a big vertical high-rise building that will accommodate a number of people, so you can share the units. But in this case, there's a bit of a problem on that one. There's also a problem that we have something that is happening, backyard housing that's happening, and there's no regulations on that at the moment. High cost of urban infrastructure in health area, if it exists, there very little that is there in terms of urban infrastructure. Of course, it's expensive, particularly on roads, and electricity is that's much better, but it's a bit relief on that one, but still an expensive area. Housing delivery programs issues, I may have touched on this already. There is a poor leakage of linkages of the key actors, central versus local governments. Local governments are responsible for the planning, for giving building permits, for managing the land, but the central government has the control on the money of payments are made directed to this, and the local government, even getting a change of use, for example, it has to go through the local government. They may approve, but then maybe there's approved at central level. Even between most developers, investors, and financiers, there are no good connections. And here is where the government has been trying. They say in the pipeline there was an attempt to develop, to establish a real estate developers association, real estate regulatory authority that would keep these three key actors together. The government has biased towards home ownership, which works against rental, but rental are really very necessary because they are the first accommodation option for any person, after attaining the 18 years of age. Dominance of small-scale landlords in the market, they actually providing more than almost 85% of the urban housing in the cities. Housing has not been a national priority, that's debatable, but that's the truth. That if you look at a different policy, you will not see housing featuring at all. Human settlement, yes, and human settlement is much broader, but housing is more to do with different units as individual units, something that an individual can actually at macro level manage and make money out of it. It's also a commodity. So now are there any prospects of rental housing as an investment in the Tanzania case? Yes. I'll say that because look at the yield analysis for rental units, and you see that between 4, almost 5% and 6% there are yields that you can expect from standalone. Standalone, they don't give you as much return as multi-family unit blocks, and the reasons are the cost of a standalone it can be high, and the rent that you can get there is more or less balanced and by the multi-family unit. So the cost could be more or less the same, but you only provide for an individual who can only afford a certain amount, whereas multi-family units, you have several individuals, they could afford more or less the same like tenant on the standalone housing. What we are saying is blocks of small units, they would yield between 7 to 9.6%. This is what we found. And we did this during the not during the pandemic, but we did this towards the end of last year. And those were the figures. I don't know why they are not during the pandemic. I think this is from demand for rental housing is unequivocal. It's for certain. It's for the reason for it. There's a lot of immigrants to the cities. The Tanzania population, urban population, will grow to 50% by year 2025. Currently, it has 34. The youth labor that is moving to the market, and most of it finding its way to urban is quite high. We're looking at university at least 190 and 100 each year. We have 150 students from the colleges are coming in. And they need to get into some accommodation. I'm coming close to the end. There's been increasing stock, particularly in the upper head housing, which we said, and this has actually pushed down the prices. And what you see, what has also happened, people are actually now forced to, because particularly the upper head housing, they had big houses, big villas. Now they are being forced to subdivide this and so they can realize. Let me see if I can show you. Yes, this like what you see here is a second floor apartments. It's a 3-bedroom house. Now it has been redesigned so that we have 2 flats. Initially, this was going out for 1,200. This is the actual situation, 1,200 per month, and it's full vacant. And they couldn't get so the incumbent the tenant moved out, and therefore they couldn't get a new tenant. And therefore, this is a prudent landlord who thought of what to do. So he had this subdivided. So he had 3 bedrooms. Now you have 2 bedrooms on either side. So you have 4 rooms. So it's simply what has happened. He has changed lot of the dining room, combined them so that now he has 2 tenants. And these are rated at 700, which means he's actually getting more than the initial sum that was getting. He was getting 1,200. Now he gets 1,400 per month usually. Similarly, this one this is also a big bungalow that was so it's a 4-bedroom bungalow, and this was changed into was subdivided. And now he has 2 additional units, and so now so a 4-bedroom now gets 2 units, and you can have tenants in those things and those. So the interesting part of it is in terms of the national policies. The government has put in a lot of incentives that encourage rental housing, or that encourage housing, and therefore rental housing. There's a secondary mortgage liquidity facility that's a Tanzania mortgage financing company that was set up in 2011. We have a Mortgage Finance Act of 2008, and there are some regulations that were made last 2 years, and they are actually encouraging people to come in and invest. In the pipeline, we have an estate agency bill. We have the review of the human settlement development policy of the 2000. We adopted a housing policy, and there's a national housing information center that's been set up. And we were lucky, the team that worked on the rental housing market participated in the study on the, forming establishing a national housing information center, which is likely to take up, we don't know when, but quite soon. Well, promoting affordable rental housing is what are the options. Now, if you wanted to do this, then there are a couple of things, and some of this has already happened. Trying to understand how the rental housing market works in the country. It's huge potentials there, and you can look at the number of cities and towns that are growing. There's a need to recognize the role that micro and meso actors, especially the small-scale landlords and the informal agents that play the market. That's imposed at policy and institutional level. We think there's an action that is required to make planning standards and regulations more adaptable, more friendly to supporting rental housing markets. As I already said, well, the rent control is important, but well, sometimes we need to be flexible. The argument on the home ownership, I think everybody wants to be a homeowner, but then the reality is rental housing is indeed the first option, and any person would want, who is available to any person. And well, it's in conclusion, the concern is the government has done quite well. There's a lot of easing of credit facilities to developers, particularly small landlords. The housing supply has been boosted, particularly by landlords. There's a lot of simple items that have been planned are actually taking place, and they are going to stimulate the housing supply. The role small landlords has to be reckoned, and it has actually already done quite a bit. They have positively addressed the housing accommodation. The informal sector operates on norms that are practical. So if we work through the norms that the govern the informal sector, maybe we could find solutions to how to address the affordable rental housing. Certainly, formats in high-rise blocks have a dual advantage that they provide cheaper units and they use less land. So that's thank you for following. I hope I made myself clear, and I wish this was like an interaction.